Hello, and welcome to the Necromancer support group. I am Dr. Bonesworth. Yes, I've heard all the jokes before. We have a few new members with us today, so let's start by going around and introducing ourselves. What school of necromancy are you addicted to? What has it done to your life?
Well, hello. I am Victor Skelly, and I am a necromancer of the kind that make the body and then uses the soul from another body to animate them. Life was going well, until I spent all my money on souls, and I could not pay my bills. They took my minions, and I have been trying to get my life back on track.
Thank you, and let's welcome Victor.
Hey, Victor.
Victor. I am Drac von Slippingston. I am a hemomancer. I control blood, use it to make blood zombies. I do not think that I belong in this group, but I have been ordered to attend as part of my plea bargain. I was caught robbing a blood bank. In my defense, they would not let me buy it. What sort of blood bank does not sell blood? Thank you, Drac. Let's welcome Drac, everyone. Hello,
Howdy, Drac. Welcome, Drac.
Oh, darlings, hello. I am Frederick Shadowmancer, master of the dark arts and generally fantastic at all I do. I'm here because I simply can't manage the weight of my own magnificence. Frederick? Fine. I'm also here because I accidentally released a dear little shadow beastie. Took out an orphanage, you know. Many dead, but it's all in the name of magic, right? That's something we're going to need to address, Frederick. But for now, let's all welcome Frederick.
Welcome, Howdy, Frederick. Howdy, y'all. I'm Chester, and I'm a bugomancer. Now, don't go rolling your eyes. Bugs are creatures, too, and they don't need all that fancy life force to keep 'em pumping and wriggling. Just some high sugar syrup, fresh ginger, and the right little incarnation. You got yourself a tiny little army. Oh, by the way, I'm the one who brought those cookies. High protein, tastes just like coconut.
Let me just put this cookie down. Say hello to everyone. Say hello to Chester, everyone.
Welcome, Chester.
Hello, Chester.
This episode of GMspiration is brought to you by Chiron's Chiropractic Clinic and Discount Bone Bazaar. Need to be up, feeling your best? After centuries tending to the undead, you too can now be treated first bony hand by the legendary boatman himself. You'll be moving as fluid as free as the river Styx. While you're there, pick up a spare femur or rib. No bony bones here. What about hilarious humorous? Looking for something specific? He's got a skeleton more. Visit Chiron's Chiropractic Clinic and Discount Bone Bazaar today. All undead patrons must pay 2 gold entry fee or be added to the Bone Bazaar stock. Necromancers are one of the most visceral archetypes. Bone, flesh, mindless groans, the necromancer stands among a horde of undead as it descends on a town. If you're going to add a necromancer to your world, there's lots of inspiration to draw on. But what exactly do you want your necromancer to be able to do? What are their powers? How do they work in your world? There are so many necromancers running around in pop culture. It can be overwhelming to nail down exactly what a necromancer is in your world. Let's start with the definition. All interpretations of necromancy include some sort of variation on the ability to communicate with the dead. Yes, that does mean that mediums that channel and speak with the dead are technically necromancers by this definition. Where this definition falls flat is if in the world you are crafting, spirits and the dead routinely contact the living. This speaks to how much your version of necromancy needs to be aligned with your world. In addition to communicating, necromancers often can command the dead. Other powers include bringing the dead back to life, either through reviving them back to living or as raising undead servants. Sometimes necromancy is described as death magic, or combined with things like black magic, dark magic, and witchcraft. This is going to get complicated, with lots of concepts and linkages. So let's start with some real-world ancient religions to explore how people link these concepts together. You might notice a lot of overlaps between religions and mythologies from similar regions. It is common for gods to bleed across cultures and countries. This may appear muddled, but remember that time periods often stretch for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It is normal for things to change and evolve over such long periods of time. To start with, it's very common for gods to have multiple concepts that fall under their domain. Oddly, it is also very common to have multiple gods for very similar concepts. For example, the Etruscan and Roman mythology had, among others, Mania, goddess of death and chaos, and Orcus, god of the underworld and punisher of broken oaths. Eventually, Orcus was merged with Dispater and Pluto, two other death gods. Orcus is also the name of a demon lord with power over death and undead in Dungeons & Dragons mythology, while Dispater was an archdevil. You'll see a lot of names popping up in media as references or inspiration. Sort of why you're listening to this, huh? Greek mythology has dozens of death gods, including Thanatos, the personification of dead, son of Nyx, goddess of night, and brother to Hypnos, goddess of sleep. Notice how these three concepts are so closely linked: death, night, and sleep. In our modern way of speaking, I can easily use terms related to sleep to describe death. For example, unending sleep, breathless slumber, and someone who shall never wake. There's also, of course, the more gangster, sleep with the fishes. Other Greek death gods include Hecate, goddess of witchcraft and night. Again, we see witchcraft and night aligned with death. There is Hades, god of death and riches, king of the underworld. Confusingly, the underworld also became known as Hades. Hades had a three-headed dog, Cerberus, commonly seen guarding the gates to the underworld. Hades was cold, strict, and would become enraged if a soul tried to leave, someone tried to steal a soul, or if someone tried to cheat death. You may know the story of Sisyphus, forced to eternally push a rock uphill with it rolling back to the bottom before getting to the top. Sisyphus was condemned due to attempting to cheat death. Hades combines concepts of cold neutrality, strictness, and maintaining order. Chiron, ferryman of the underworld and carrier of souls down the Acheron and Styx rivers. The dead were often buried with coins placed on their chest or face to pay Chiron. Lots of us would be aware of the image of coins covering the eyes as a very powerful image of the dead. If the soul did not have coins, it was said it needed to roam the banks of the river for 100 years before Chiron would take them. Always remember to pay the ferryman. Atropos was one of the three fates, and the one that would cut the thread of life. Her sister, Clotho, spun the thread, and Lachesis measured. This terminology still exists today, with the phrase, life cut short, meaning someone who died early. Can't say for certain that these is linked, but the phrase, cut one's life short, is at least from the 1600s. Sounds cool, so let's say they're linked. So there we have some interesting ones. There is movement of the dead to the afterlife, elements of fate, and collection of dues and debts. Lastly for this pantheon is Apollo, the god of archery, music, dance, truth, prophecy, and healing and disease. Quite the breadth. Disease and healing are interesting. Remember that knowledge of medicine was more limited back then. I would not necessarily equate these two concepts as being opposite, but in ancient times, sickness could be seen as the opposite of healing. So to sum up, in Greek mythology, we have death being linked to concepts like fate, night, witchcraft, darkness, and sleep, with those ruling over death having debt, payment, justice, order, neutrality, and rules. In Hindu Vedic, we have Chitragupta, god of justice after death, Dhumavati, goddess of death, misfortune, and temporality, Shiva, god of destruction, time, and the arts, and Yama, god of death and the ruler of the afterlife. There are some interesting additions here: time, the temporary nature of things, destruction, misfortune, and justice. Justice has strong links with death, with the soul or spirit often getting judged based on the actions of their life. In Buddhist mythology, we have Yalluren Wang, also known as King Yama. As I mentioned earlier, we see a lot of this cross-pollination of gods, or very similar gods being shared across areas. King Yama is often depicted sitting behind a desk, judging the dead. In Japanese Buddhism, it is King Emma or Yema, god and ruler of the dead. Dragon Ball fans might recognize the name King Yema, as he was the ogre administrator that processed Goku on his first death. Judgment after death is a very common motif in most mythologies, judging or weighing the deceased based on their actions. In ancient Egypt, the god Anubis was the god of funerary rites, guide to the underworld, and guardian of the dead. Anubis would weigh the heart of the deceased against a feather, which represented Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. Fail the test, and you are fed to Amit, the devourer of dead, the head of a crocodile, front quarters of a lion, and hind quarters of a hippo. Amit got junk in its trunk. The scales are another powerful image. Modern day, we have Lady Justice, often with scales, blindfold, and sword. The idea that upon death the value of a life is judged fits in many mythologies and religions. Continuing with Japanese mythology, we have Shigenami as a general term for the god of death, or gods of death. This is taken partially from the concept of the Grim Reaper coming across from Western mythologies. There are dozens of anime based on Shigenami. These include Bleach, Death Note, and Soul Eater, to name 3. Shigenami is a general term for any Japanese kami or gods with domains of death. For example, we have Izanami, god of creation and death. After her death, she became the queen of Yomi, or the underworld, and goddess of the dead. Izanami's husband, Izanagi, travelled to Yomi upon her death. I want to read one summary of what happened. Izanami asked Izanagi not to look at her in the light. Izanagi made a torch and entered Yomi no Kuni. There, he at last found her. He was shocked by her appearance. She was rotting and crawling with maggots, and 8 hideous gods of thunder were hanging onto her body. Terrified, Izanagi decided to flee from Yomi no Kuni back to the land of the living. "I told you not to look, and yet you ignored me. You will pay for the shame you have caused me," shouted Izanami, and ordered the evil hags of the underworld to chase after him. The idea of light revealing hideousness is not unique, but it is incredibly powerful. So from this we have death, rotting, hideousness, and hags. Hags, of course, being quite analogous with witchcraft. One of Izanami's and Izanagi's children was Sasuno, a real mixed bag of domains. He was god of the sea, storms, and he also became the god of pestilence and diseases. If his name sounds familiar, in Naruto, the strongest Sharingan ability was called Susanoo. The god Susanoo is the younger brother of Amaterasu, also a Sharingan ability. Susanoo, at least in later versions, combines disease and pestilence. Storms and flooding often bring disease due to stagnant water and large amounts of nutrients in the water, which causes algal blooms and feeding other similar bugs and parasites. Perhaps this is how they'll mix together. So we have spent a lot of time talking about death gods and various domains and powers. Hopefully this has piqued your creative vibes and giving you some inspiration. Let's go to structuring our own necromancers and how life and death operate in your world. Here are a few questions to ask yourself and kick things off. First, do souls exist? Are souls linked to a person's mind and memories, or can they be separated? Are there gods or entities trying to control and protect souls and spirits? What concepts are linked or closely aligned to necromancy? How prevalent are ghosts and similar spirits in your world? Are undead animated by souls, demons, or some other force like mana? To help with these, let's run through some of the common ancillary powers that are often aligned with the school of necromancy. I'm going to define them for our purposes. Obviously, because these are fictional, you can define them however you like for your worlds. First, we have shadow magic, the ability to manipulate shadows and darkness, throwing balls of darkness, raising shadow warriors, and teleporting between areas of darkness. Sun Jinwoo from Solo Leveling is certainly a necromancer, but very much through shadows. In One Piece, Gecko Moria's shadow fruit, among other things, is able to use stolen shadows to create zombies. While the physical strength comes from the corpse itself, the personality and fighting techniques come from the shadow. Next, we have soul manipulation, the ability to manipulate their own or other people's souls. Depending on if the soul is linked to life and consciousness, this can include ripping souls from someone and killing them, mind control, or harvesting souls for power. The Thug Slayer White from Tower of God has the ability to absorb souls and expend them for powerful sword attacks. If you're going to include soul manipulation, it is important to determine what a soul is. In some media, it is the mind of the person, and without a soul, the body dies. In others, it is the spark that brings life and joy, but without it, a person can live, although they experience no pleasure or happiness. Voldemort, from the Harry Potter series, splits his soul to make Horcruxes to ensure his immortality. In that world, this magic is called dark magic and part of other forbidden spells. By committing murder, the soul is damaged and can be torn and sealed into an object. The effect on the wizard is that they become more twisted and inhumane. A major arc of the Black Clover manga and anime involves souls being brought back from the dead and implanted into people. The result is the soul and mind of the deceased taking over the new body. The soul in this case includes not only the mind, but also magical talent and pool of mana. In Dungeons & Dragons, the necromancy school of magic includes magic that manipulates and captures souls, such as Magic Jar and Soul Cage. The clone spell creates a body that the soul is automatically transferred into upon death. Next we have spirit and life energy manipulation. This is very similar to soul manipulation, generally coming down to the construction of the world to define what each mean. Aang, from Avatar The Last Airbender, performs energy bending after learning it from a lion turtle. The avatar itself is a sort of spirit manipulation, being able to speak to the previous avatars. This is similar to the power of the Black Panther from the Marvel Universe, who is able to speak to the previous Black Panthers. In the Black Panther movie, T'Challa speaks to his father, the previous Black Panther. T'Challa also has some necromancy powers in one storyline, but let's skip that for now. Body and flesh manipulation. One of the earliest examples of flesh grafting would be the 1818 book Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. In it, Victor Frankenstein creates a grotesque human Frankenstein's monster, creating life by merging other pieces of bodies together and then animating it with a spark. This is a common subtrope in necromancy, as the necromancer creates bodies and then animates them. I won't go into too much detail, given it's only just come out, but in the anime, I was reincarnated as the seventh prince, so I can take my time to perfect my magical ability. One of the main antagonists in the series creates corpses and then animates them with spirits. Next, we have life and death manipulation. This is a pretty common power for necromancers, giving and taking life. Sometimes it is life force, sometimes it's another power like mana or unholy or holy power. Effectively, the necromancer has the ability to imbue or remove life. In games like Dungeons & Dragons, a lot of spells are listed under necromancy that heal or transfer life between creatures. For example, Spare the Dying stops someone from bleeding out. Wither and Bloom deals damage and allows an ally to heal by expending a hit die. Life Transference deals damage to your character while giving it to someone else. It is quite commonplace to see a necromancer deal a type of damage that directly hurts someone's life, be it necromantic, death, or negative energy, or some sort of direct black magic. Next we have witchcraft. In most fantasy settings, witchcraft is a sort of esoteric or forbidden magic practiced by witches and warlocks. It generally includes curses, potions, animating small items, and using familiars. In many settings, it includes communicating with spirits, both dead and natural, pacts with demons, and stealing souls. So, we have a bunch of inspiration. Let's craft something. First, let's group some concepts together. I want all my necromancers to be able to summon something, but what exactly they summon is dependent on their powers. Some kind of undead, like a zombie or skeleton. We will use the concepts to craft their powers and type of summon. So I'm going to pick 3 concepts that were linked in some of the previous areas, and then we're going to use those concepts to craft a necromancer's powers, and then from that, their personality or what they're trying to achieve. So first we have death, rotting, and hideousness. The Pale Queen, also known as the Lady of Rot. The Pale Queen is an ancient lich living deep in the rotting Elrusian swamps. The queen is only seen in moonlight, where she appears as a beautiful woman with ivory skin, obsidian hair, and piercing blue eyes. In any other light, be it sun or fire, her hideousness is revealed. The swamp is filled with rotting corpses at her command, and it is said that her touch decays flesh. If you need to cross the Elrusian swamps, do not follow the will-o'-wisps, for they will lead you to the queen's rotting clutches. This one is fairly standard, drawing on Izanami. Beauty revealed as rotting hideousness is a fantastic reveal, even if people know it's coming. Next we have death, sleep, and night. Eldrick Everblack, necromancer of the endless dream. Eldrick's school of magic allows him to draw upon the nightmares of others, merging them with the shadowy spirits of the dead to create living horrors. Eldrick's abilities also allow him to enter the minds of those who are asleep, trapping them in never-waking dreams and animating them into zombie-like states. So I love these 3 concepts together, as they are a novel way to conceptualize necromancers. Elric is not physically powerful. In fact, you could write him as extremely weak, relying on shadows and illusions to fight. But what he does is he draws out something truly primal from people, their own horrors and nightmares. From that, using his shadow magic, he is able to manipulate and poses a unique threat to anyone he fights. I will say I do have a bit of a soft spot for villains who cannot physically defend themselves once their ruse has been seen through. Sort of like the real world, their power comes from the belief and fear that they instill in others. The inspiration for using sleep to control people and turn them into zombies comes from the original concept in voodooism, where a zombie was someone who was controlled rather than dead person. But I'm going to save that full story for another video. Next we have death, disease, storms, and pestilence. Enter Esme Dornoch, the Thundering Death. Dornoch's magic involves summoning storms imbued with pestilence. Where these rains fall, plants and animals become sick and die. As the rot and pestilence spreads, she uses the rotting decay to summon powerful entities of disease, including bloated cattle and rotting zombies. Dornoch's personal guards are raging water elementals composed of fetid and disgusting water. This one is quite different from your normal necromancer. Dornoch's power lies in her ability to seed large areas and then use infected people and animals. The longer she is able to spread her pestilence, the more powerful she becomes. In some fiction, magic is very formulaic and broken down into schools with distinct cause and effect spells. But sometimes it's nice to write magic, which is a lot less formulaic, a lot more ancient, a lot more strange. These sort of magics operate on a primitive logic level, where different types of energies draw and create things. For example, you might have a battlefield littered with corpses. As they rot and decay, undead naturally spring forth or gather around. This speaks to an ancient, more primal way of considering magic, and can be a good way to separate your necromancer, particularly if they're a villain, from your party or players, or the antagonist, who tends to have rules that they need to follow. Ancient magics work more based on feelings and concepts, drawing things together and pulling them apart. This is similar to witchcraft, where a witch may use things like negative emotions and feelings to cast magic, rather than arcane runes and sigils. It's up to you to decide what your rules are for your world, who abides by them, and who doesn't. Lady Death, the Eternal Judge. Lady Death's real name has long been lost in time. It is said that her life was a tragic series of events. She swore that she would create something free from evil, where all could live and be safe. The lady's conviction was so strong that on her deathbed she was approached by the demon god Eob. The lady traded her humanity for immortality, forever tying herself to the Pale City as its watcher, protector, and judge. Centuries later, the Pale City is a thriving metropolis, with thousands of undead providing the labor for most of the city's workforce. As such, those that live in the Pale City are only required to work a few days a week, and encouraged to spend the rest of their time in study, research, arts, and entertainment. A common pastime in the city is painting skulls with floral patterns. The city is filled with thousands of these painted skulls, including on all of the undead. The lady has the ability to manifest through any of these painted skulls. She uses this power to silently watch and protect the city. What I like about the Lady of Death is that she is not an evil necromancer. She summons dead, but uses them to provide for the people in the city. She also draws power from art. Painted skulls, such as those from the Day of the Dead or Dia de los Muertos, celebrations are joyful, paying their respects to those who came before. So there we have our 4 necromancers, each with very different concepts and powers. They are the dark, the stormy, the just, and the ugly. Necromancers do not need to be evil, although messing with the dead is often considered the domain of gods, and to act otherwise is blasphemous. In this episode, we have covered various mythological death gods, ask a series of questions to help you define how death and necromancy work in your world, and run through 4 example necromancers using various different powers and concepts. That wraps up this episode of GMspiration. Thanks for listening, and remember to have fun.